Hey guys, we're ready to continue. We're actually going to wrap up Colossians chapter 3 this week. We're going to finish Colossians next week in chapter 4. But this week, we've been really talking about the certainties of our calling, and we know that that's in our salvation that we've found in Christ. And so we're seeking the things above. We're setting our minds to things above. We're hidden with Christ, all those things. And then we talked about the certainties of our calling in everyday life. So we talked about the things that we're going to put off, and we talked about the things that we're going to put on. And we talked about that it wasn't easy. And it wasn't natural, but we have the power in us to be obedient in all these things and to really be have spiritual victories here because Christ, His Spirit dwells in us. And so we have the power to obey. We have the power to overcome. And so that's why we're able to live out this in everyday life. And so today we're going to continue with everyday life. And today we're going to talk about the home and the workplace. So pick up with me in verse 18. It says, "Wives, be subject to your husbands as fitting to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. Fathers, do not exasperate your children so that they will not lose heart." And so here we're going to talk about our everyday our calling, characteristics of our calling in everyday life. And so this is what the picture that God has for the home. Once again, these are the roles that God has set up. And so He says wives are to be subject to their husbands, submissive to their husbands. And this is the way that God designed it. But you never submit to abuse. You never submit to things that go against what God says. That would be perverting this, but it does mean that God's plan for the home is that wives be subject to their husbands, and it doesn't mean that you're inferior or you're not as smart or any of those things that kind of the narrative that's pushed in the world today, that really just means that this is how God designed marriage, that wives be subject to their husbands. And I love that one author said, it's a beautiful balance here. He doesn't just address the wives. He doesn't just address the husbands. He doesn't just address the children. He addresses everyone in the home. So that was first with the wives. Next, it says, husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them. You know, that God has given husbands this high standard. When we look in Ephesians, it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave Himself for it. And so this high standard that He has for husbands. Children, be obedient to your parents. This is the way God said it was supposed to be, that we give them instruction, we train them, and they are to be obedient. And when they are not being obedient, there should be a consequence. This is how we bring in our submission to God and to Christ into our homes. It should be affecting our homes. Our homes should look different. Our home, and hey, just like I said on Wednesday, it ain't easy and it ain't natural. But, we have the power from the Spirit, the guidance of His Word. We have what it takes to live this out. It won't be perfect, but we can do it God's way. Our homes can look the way He designed them to look. It says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. He gives us these boundaries. He gives us these directions. And so our homes need to be submissive to God and the roles that He's given us. Then it's going to move to our workplace. It says, slaves, in all things, obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, you work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you receive the reward of an inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. So now he brings it into the workplace, and he starts he says slave or bondservant. This is one of the I guess you would say the lowest economic category that we could go into, and even in that, he says, obey your masters on earth. And it says, and you don't merely do it as an act, that you do it out of sincerity of your heart. And I love that one commentator said this, whether it deals with our homes or our workplaces, God sees. You might be fooling, everybody about what your home is like. You might be fooling everybody about what you're like as an employee. But you're not fooling God. He sees it. He looks at our intentions and all the things that we're doing. And so he says, you sincerely serve those you work for here on earth. And it says, whatever you do it, work hard. This is once again the way God designed us to be, that we should be good employees, that we should be hard workers. And that means that the most menial tasks that you're working for the Lord, you're not working for your boss. Once again, there's no dividing line between the sacred and the secular. That we're living for Christ. We're setting our minds. We're seeking Him in all things, and that means in our workplace. And then he goes on to say that the reward you will receive will be from Him. And once again, He knows every bit of it. He knows what we're like in our homes and our workplaces. And it says, it says, you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. This takes a lot of reminders, because we all get frustrated in our homes and we all get frustrated in our workplaces. But this really sets everything back to center. Once again, you realign with what God says and what He wants for us. And then it says, for he who does wrong will receive the consequences of the wrong which he has done, and that without partiality. Once again, God sees. He knows everything. We're not fooling Him in either area. And it says, and that there will be consequences. We see that. We see the consequences of the choices that we make in our homes and in our workplaces. I love this quote, and it said, when it's talking about our homes, it says, as less and less attention is devoted to the home, even so, our civilization deteriorates rapidly. Don't we see it? We see this. And it said, God sees us in our homes. God sees us at work. And He will reward, or He will allow the consequences without partiality. So we have to learn the characteristics of our calling in our everyday life, in our homes, and in our workplaces, and remember that God sees, but that it's hard, and it's going to take submission to Him first to continue to realign to what He asks of us. But the fruit that we receive when we honor God in our homes and our workplaces will overflow. It'll spread. It'll make your community and your home and our churches better if we'll learn to submit to the Lord and submit to the roles that He's given us, and to do all this for Him, for His glory. I love that it says, it is Christ whom we serve.